Welcome to the Art of Effective Communication. Unlocking the Secrets to Better Relationships and Success, brought to you by Mindful Literary. In this audiobook, we will delve into the transformative power of communication. Whether you're looking to enhance your personal relationships, advance in your career, or simply become a more effective communicator, this guide is designed to provide you with the tools and insights you need to succeed. We will explore the intricacies of both verbal and nonverbal communication, the importance of empathetic listening, and the strategies for building meaningful connections. From understanding body language and tone to mastering public speaking and digital communication, each chapter is filled with practical advice and real-world examples to help you navigate various communication challenges. You'll hear stories of individuals who have transformed their lives through improved communication skills, alongside expert insights and proven techniques. By the end of this journey, you'll have a deeper understanding of how to communicate with clarity, compassion, and confidence, fostering stronger relationships and achieving your personal and professional goals. So, settle in, open your mind, and prepare to embark on a journey that will change the way you connect with the world around you. Together, we'll unlock the secrets to effective communication and pave the way to better relationships and greater success. Thank you for choosing this audiobook. Let's begin this journey towards mastering the art of communication. Chapter 1. Introduction to Effective Communication. The importance of communication. I'll never forget the moment I fully grasped the importance of effective communication. It wasn't during a formal training session or while reading a how-to guide. Instead, it was during a simple conversation with my best friend. We were having one of those deep, late-night talks, and she suddenly shared something incredibly personal. I realized at that moment how much trust and comfort good communication can build. Here was someone who felt safe enough to open up about her deepest thoughts and feelings, all because we had established a solid foundation of understanding and honest dialogue. Understanding the significance of effective communication is something that resonates deeply with everyone. It's about more than just exchanging information. It's about connecting with people on a deeper level. Whether you're talking to a friend, a family member, or someone at work, the way you communicate can help you build strong and meaningful relationships. Think of it like this. Every meaningful relationship in your life is built on countless small moments of interaction. Each small conversation lays another brick in the foundation of trust and empathy between you and the other person. When you make the effort to be clear, thoughtful, and genuine in your communication, you create a space where others feel valued and understood. Effective communication has the power to drive your personal and professional growth. I remember during one of my first jobs, I was hesitant to speak up during meetings. I had ideas, but lacked the confidence to share them. Over time, I noticed the people who were thriving were the ones who communicated their thoughts clearly and confidently. They weren't necessarily the ones with the best ideas, but they were the ones who knew how to express their thoughts and collaborate with others. Recognizing that pushed me to improve my communication skills. It wasn't just about talking more, it was about learning to listen actively, respond thoughtfully, and convey my ideas in a way that resonated with others. The more I practiced, the more I noticed my relationships at work improving, and with that, opportunities started to open up. But it's not just about professional growth. Communication also plays a crucial role in your overall well-being and mental health. Have you ever had a conversation that left you feeling happier, lighter, or more understood? That's because good communication can have a profound impact on your emotional state. I remember a particularly tough phase in my life where I felt utterly isolated. I decided to join a local support group, and the first session was a revelation. Just hearing others talk about their struggles and being able to share my own, in a space where I wasn't judged, lifted an immense weight off my shoulders. It made me realize the therapeutic power of speaking and being heard. It fostered a sense of community and belonging that is essential for mental and emotional health. In our fast-paced lives, we often underestimate the impact our words and interactions can have on our overall life satisfaction. Taking the time to really communicate can transform your everyday experiences. Something as simple as actively listening to your partner talk about their day can strengthen your relationship significantly. Communicating your needs and setting boundaries clearly can reduce misunderstandings and conflicts, leading to a more fulfilling and harmonious life. It's these small, consistent efforts in how we interact with others that pave the way for a happier, more connected, and satisfying life. One practical tip I've found incredibly useful is to always strive for empathy in communication. Try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, see the world from their perspective, and respond with kindness and understanding. It makes all the difference. My personal journey to mastering communication. Early in my journey, I didn't think much about how I communicated. I assumed that my words were enough and that others would simply understand my point of view. But as life progressed, I realized that things weren't that straightforward. Misunderstandings and conflicts became almost regular occurrences. I recall a period when my relationships, both personal and professional, suffered significantly due to my ineffective communication skills. One instance that stands out vividly was with a close friend. We had an argument over something trivial that quickly escalated into a major conflict. We stopped talking for weeks, and during that time, I reflected deeply on what went wrong. It dawned on me that my lack of empathetic listening and my tendency to interrupt had contributed to the fallout. This was a bitter pill to swallow, but it marked the beginning of my commitment to enhancing my communication skills. To address my challenges, I began observing how effective communicators engaged people. I noticed their active listening, how they maintained eye contact, acknowledged others' feelings, and responded thoughtfully. I tried to incorporate these strategies into my interactions. One of the first steps I took was to practice active listening. This was incredibly challenging for someone who was always eager to speak their mind. I learned to resist the urge to formulate my response while the other person was still talking. Instead, I focused on understanding their message. Another key lesson was the importance of nonverbal communication. Actions, they say, speak louder than words, and I found that my body language often contradicted my verbal intentions. I worked on maintaining open postures, nodding to show I was engaged, and making appropriate eye contact. Mindfulness played a significant role here. By being aware of my own body language, I was able to better align my words with my actions. Over time, these small changes started making a big difference. My relationships improved, and so did my ability to resolve conflicts. I noticed that people were more willing to share their thoughts and feelings with me, and this, in turn, enriched our interactions. One of the most transformative strategies I implemented was the practice of empathy. I consciously tried to put myself in the other person's shoes, asking myself how they might be feeling and why they were reacting a certain way. This shift in perspective was immensely powerful, as it allowed me to respond with greater compassion and understanding. Another strategy that proved effective was being mindful of my tone and choice of words. I learned that how we say something can be just as important as what we say. I practiced using a calm and reassuring tone, especially in tense situations. Additionally, I made it a point to use I statements instead of you statements. For example, saying I feel concerned when, rather than you always. This subtle change helped in reducing defensiveness and promoted more constructive dialogues. If there's one piece of practical advice that stood out from my journey, it's the power of genuine curiosity. Asking open-ended questions and showing sincere interest in the other person's thoughts and feelings can transform any conversation. It not only helps build trust, but also opens the door to deeper, more meaningful connections. The power of effective listening. I never quite understood the power of truly listening until a few years ago. There I was, in a cafe, sitting across the table from my friend, Mark. He was talking about a personal challenge he was facing, but my mind was elsewhere, partially on my phone, and half focused on my own thoughts. Suddenly, Mark stopped talking, and there was a heavy silence. He looked at me with an expression that I now recognize as disappointment. It hit me then how important it is to be fully present. Active listening isn't just about hearing words, it's about embracing the person speaking. This form of listening fosters deeper connections and promotes a real understanding. The difference in our communication was night and day once I began practicing active listening. It's more than nodding or saying "aha." It involves empathy, patience, and genuine interest in what's being said. When we listen actively, we validate the speaker's feelings and experiences. This validation can lead to trust, warmth, and a more profound bond. I remember when I made a conscious effort to apply these principles with Mark again. He described feeling heard and valued. It wasn't that I had the perfect advice, it was the sheer act of listening that made the difference. Imagine the connectivity we can build, with family, friends, colleagues, just by truly listening. To enhance listening skills, it's crucial to practice certain techniques. One of the most effective methods I found was to give undivided attention, making eye contact, nodding, and leaning slightly towards the speaker. Techniques such as summarizing and reflecting back what the speaker has said not only show that you're paying attention, but also clarify any misunderstandings. For example, saying, "So what you're feeling is," can open doors to deeper conversation and understanding. It's also essential to manage the barriers that inhibit listening: internal distractions, biases, and preconceived notions. Overcoming these requires mindfulness and the willingness to put judgments aside. Ultimately, listening goes beyond the ears. It's about tuning in with your heart and mind. When you start to listen actively, you might even notice shifts in your interactions. People feel safer, more engaged, and are likely to reciprocate the kindness. If there's one takeaway to remember, it's that every effort to listen actively is a step towards building a more compassionate and understanding world. Chapter 2: Understanding Nonverbal Communication. Body language and its impact. When I first stepped into the world of public speaking, I thought that my words alone would carry the weight of my message. It took many awkward interactions and seemingly glazed-over stares for me to realize that body language plays an indispensable role in communication. It's not just about what you say, but how you say it. Your gestures, posture, and facial expressions speak volumes. I remember a pivotal moment when I was addressing a small group. Despite my carefully chosen words, I could sense the audience's disconnection. It dawned on me that my folded arms and tense stance might have been creating an invisible barrier. By consciously loosening up, making eye contact, and using open gestures, I could immediately see a shift. Their faces softened, and they leaned in, showing genuine interest and connection. Nonverbal cues can indeed be powerful influencers. During a heated debate, for example, I once witnessed two people exchanging points, both equally compelling. Yet, the one who maintained a calm demeanor, used deliberate hand movements, and nodded attentively, while the other spoke, created a perception of being more credible and trustworthy. Meanwhile, the person who frequently interrupted, avoided eye contact, and displayed closed-off gestures like crossed arms, unintentionally came off as defensive and less convincing. This made me realize that communication is as much about reading the unspoken signals as it is about verbal exchange. I've found that nonverbal cues can make or break a message. Take humor, for instance. A joke delivered with a straight face and monotone voice might fall flat, while the same joke with a wink, a playful tone, and an animated expression can light up a room with laughter. It's fascinating how subtle changes in body language can turn ordinary exchanges into memorable interactions. One tip that's always worked for me is to mirror the body language of the person I'm talking to. This simple act of mimicry helps build rapport and signals empathy, making the other person feel understood and valued. Reading facial expressions. When we think about communication, words often come to mind first. But have you ever been in a situation where the words didn't quite match up with the emotions being conveyed? This happens more often than we realize, because so much of our communication is nonverbal. Developing the ability to interpret facial expressions accurately and understanding the emotions behind them can transform our interactions and relationships. I recall one particular moment when I was speaking to a friend who said she was fine, but her eyes told a different story. That subtle furrow in her brow, the slight downturn of her lips, those nonverbal cues were screaming, "I'm not okay." It's these small, often subconscious facial expressions that give us an honest glimpse into someone's emotional state. Identifying micro-expressions and subtle facial cues is like learning a new language. In effective communication, these brief, involuntary facial expressions can reveal genuine emotions that someone might be trying to hide. Picture this. You're in a meeting, presenting your ideas, and you notice a fleeting look of skepticism from one of your colleagues. This micro-expression, although fast and subtle, provides insight that could change the dynamics of the discussion. I used to think reading facial expressions was something you either had a knack for or didn't, but I've come to realize it's a skill that anyone can develop with practice and attention. One very effective technique is to observe without judgment. Just notice the different parts of someone's face when they are talking. What do their eyes do? Are their eyebrows moving? Is there a tension in their jaw? When you focus on these small movements and patterns, you become more attuned to the micro-expressions that can tell you volumes about what they're truly feeling. This heightened awareness can make our communication more empathetic and responsive. You might find, as I have, that becoming better at reading faces helps you not only in personal relationships, but also in professional settings where understanding someone's unspoken mood can make a significant difference. The role of tone and pitch in communication. Have you ever found yourself deeply moved by someone's words, not because of what they said, but because of how they said it? Tone and pitch play an incredibly important role in verbal communication. When I was a child, my mother could calm me down from the wildest tantrum with a soft, gentle tone. No matter how upset I was, the calmness in her voice made me feel safe. I learned early on that the way we say things is as crucial as the words themselves. Tone and pitch can convey a multitude of emotions, from anger to excitement, from fear to love. Consider a time when a friend shared some good news with you. The high, enthusiastic pitch in their voice likely made you feel their excitement. Conversely, if someone shared bad news in a monotonous or low tone, the seriousness of the situation would hit you differently. In professional settings, a confident tone can establish credibility and command respect, while a hesitant or wavering tone might lead to misunderstandings or a lack of trust. It's fascinating how these subtleties in our voice dynamics can shape the listener's perception and emotional reaction. Let's explore an instance during a team meeting where the manager presented a critical change in company policy. The message itself was straightforward, but the slightly higher pitch and faster rhythm of their speech indicated urgency. This subtle cue made everyone realize the importance of the change. Similarly, I've seen situations where a leader's calm and measured tone reassured a team during a crisis, showing empathy and instilling confidence. Next time you want to communicate something important, be mindful of your tone and pitch. Practice delivering your message with the right emotional undertone to ensure it resonates with your audience. You might find it helpful to record yourself and listen back, noticing how variations impact the message's effectiveness. Small adjustments in how we speak can make a substantial difference in how our words are received. Chapter 3: The Art of Empathetic Communication. Showing empathy in communication. When I was in college, I remember a classmate named Sarah who seemed to always know the right things to say in conversations. We had a mutual friend, Alex, who was struggling with anxiety, and whenever Alex spoke about his struggles, Sarah would listen intently, nodding occasionally, while offering supportive comments like, "I can't imagine how tough that must be for you." This was my first real exposure to the power of empathy in building strong and meaningful connections. It's the kind of magic that happens when you genuinely tune into someone else's experience, opening up a space where they feel understood and valued. Empathy, in its essence, is about putting ourselves in another person's shoes. It's about feeling their feelings as if they were our own. This is not something we do out of obligation, but because it's a human instinct to connect deeply with others. Remember that time when you had a rough day and a friend said, "I get it, I've been there too"? That's the comfort and connection empathy brings. It fosters a sense of trust and safety, creating a foundation for relationships that are not just strong but profoundly meaningful. Over the years, I've learned that expressing empathy isn't just about what you say, but also how you say it. Words are the first step. Simple phrases like, "That sounds really tough," or "I'm here for you," can go a long way in making someone feel acknowledged and supported. But words alone are not enough. The tone of your voice adds a dimension to your empathy that can't be overlooked. A soft, gentle tone conveys care and concern, whereas a flat or harsh tone can make even the kindest words feel insincere. Then there's body language, which speaks volumes without uttering a single word. Imagine sitting across from someone who's sharing their difficulties while you lean in slightly, maintaining eye contact, and occasionally nodding. Your body language sends a powerful message: "I am present, and I care, I am listening to you." Conversely, crossed arms, looking away, or checking your phone can break that empathetic connection faster than any words can. Each interaction is an opportunity to practice and refine your empathy. Next time you find yourself in a conversation, whether it's with a friend sharing a personal challenge or a colleague expressing frustration over work, try to fully engage with them. Listen to their words without interruption, acknowledge their feelings, and respond with supportive comments. Pay attention to your tone. Let it be warm and understanding, and use your body to convey that you are there, in that moment, with them. Empathy is not a skill we perfect overnight, but a continuous journey of understanding and connecting. As you move forward, notice how your empathetic gestures are received and how they make you feel. These insights will guide you in building deeper, more genuine relationships wherever you go. Understanding others' perspectives. I've often found myself in situations where I had to pause and think about how someone else might be feeling. Learning to step into other people's shoes and view situations from their perspective isn't just a nice thing to do, it's a necessity for meaningful connections. Richard, a friend of mine, once shared a story that changed how I see disagreements. He and his colleague were at odds over a project, both convinced that their approach was best. Instead of arguing endlessly, they decided to swap roles temporarily. Richard had to present the case from his colleague's standpoint, while his colleague did the same for him. This exercise didn't just end the conflict, but also fostered a deeper mutual respect. I realized then that understanding someone else's perspective can completely reshape a situation. Developing the ability to understand diverse viewpoints goes hand in hand with recognizing the importance of empathy in conflict resolution. In my own experience, conflicts often arise when we are too entrenched in our own views. During a family gathering, for example, an argument erupted over a trivial matter. I decided to take a step back and genuinely listen to what the other person was saying without the intent to reply. It became clear that what seemed like an argument about a minor issue was actually rooted in feelings of being unheard and underappreciated. By validating these emotions and showing genuine empathy, the tension eased, and a more constructive dialogue began. The importance of empathy in resolving conflicts became glaringly obvious to me. One practical tip that has helped me immensely is to practice active listening. When someone is sharing their viewpoint, listen without planning your retort. Focus on their words, tone, and body language. Reflect back what you've heard to ensure understanding. Doing this not only validates the other person's feelings, but also provides you with deeper insights into their perspective. This little tweak in how we communicate can be the key to unlocking more empathetic and effective interactions. Empathetic listening. Mastering the art of active and empathetic listening is like opening a door to a world of trust, understanding, and deeper connections. I remember a time when my friend was overwhelmed with work and personal issues. She needed someone to talk to, and as I sat with her, I made it my mission to listen actively. I didn't just hear her words, I felt her emotions. I leaned forward, maintained eye contact, and nodded in understanding. This wasn't about giving advice or fixing her problems, it was about truly being present. By doing so, I could feel her starting to relax and open up, knowing she was in a safe and non-judgmental space. This kind of listening can transform relationships, because it shows that we genuinely care, fostering a bond built on trust and empathy. Exploring techniques for providing validation and support through empathetic listening can be incredibly powerful in both personal and professional contexts. A vivid example from my life comes from a work setting. My colleague was facing a critical project deadline and was visibly stressed. Instead of jumping in with solutions, I chose to listen empathetically. I acknowledged his feelings. I can see you're really stressed about this deadline, and it's understandable. It's a big project. This simple validation made him feel heard and respected. In a professional context, this approach can create a supportive environment where individuals feel valued. In personal relationships, providing validation can mean the world. One evening, my partner shared feelings of frustration over a conflict with a family member. Instead of offering solutions, I empathized. It sounds really tough. I can see how much this is affecting you. In both scenarios, the act of listening with empathy and offering validation built stronger, more supportive connections. Chapter 4. Building Meaningful Relationships. Creating Trust and Rapport. There's a story I vividly remember that perfectly highlights the essence of trust and rapport in relationships. It was during a particularly challenging project at work. Our team was diverse and had a wide skill set, but we lacked a crucial element: trust. We were simply a group of talented individuals, each focused on personal tasks, but not a cohesive team. I was the project manager, and it became evident that without trusting each other, our project wouldn't succeed. Building trust isn't instant. It's a process that requires genuine effort and patience. I started by encouraging open and honest communication. I shared my own setbacks and vulnerabilities, hoping it would inspire others to do the same. Slowly, as we talked more openly, sharing both professional and personal stories, the barriers began to fall. We began to understand each other beyond job titles and tasks. This mutual understanding led to a stronger bond and, eventually, increased trust. What followed was remarkable. The project took off, and our productivity soared. The sense of camaraderie grew, and working together became more enjoyable and efficient. Through this experience, I learned valuable strategies for establishing trust. First, it is essential to listen actively. When we show genuine interest in other people's thoughts and feelings, it creates a safe space for them to open up. For instance, during one of our team meetings, I made it a point to address everyone's concerns and suggestions. I ensured that everyone felt heard and valued. This not only built trust, but also fostered a deeper connection among us. Another effective strategy is to be consistent and reliable. Trust is reinforced when we follow through on our commitments. In my case, I made sure to meet deadlines and support my team whenever they needed help. Whether it was staying late to assist a team member or simply being punctual for meetings, my consistent behavior helped build my team's confidence in me. They knew they could rely on me, which in turn prompted them to be more committed and dependable. It's also important to communicate transparently and respectfully. During difficult conversations or when providing feedback, I aim to be honest yet compassionate. I remember a time when a team member was underperforming. Instead of criticizing, I approached the situation with empathy, trying to understand the root cause of their issues. This led to a constructive dialogue where we could work on solutions together rather than harboring resentment or fear. Empathy plays a significant role in establishing trust. Demonstrating empathy involves recognizing and acknowledging the emotions of others. I made it a habit to check in with my team, not just about work, but also about their well-being. For example, during stressful periods, I would organize small breaks where we could relax and talk about non-work-related topics. This showed my team that I cared about them as individuals and not just as co-workers or subordinates. These experiences taught me that trust isn't built overnight, but through consistent, compassionate actions. Everyone can foster trust by actively listening, being reliable, communicating openly, and showing empathy. As these practices become habitual, trust and rapport naturally develop, making our relationship stronger and more meaningful. Remember, every small step towards building trust can create a significant positive impact on your relationships, both personal and professional. Establishing boundaries in communication. From an early age, I often found myself saying yes to everything, stretching myself thin. It took me years to realize that constantly overextending myself wasn't healthy. Deciding to set boundaries felt selfish at first. However, I soon learned that this act was essential for maintaining balance in my relationships. Boundaries help us maintain our identity and feel respected. When we lack boundaries, we allow others to dictate our lives, leading to resentment and emotional exhaustion. Understanding this fundamental aspect clarified that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's a vital practice for self-care and mutual respect. Communicating boundaries was another mountain to climb. I remember feeling my pulse quicken the first time I had to express a personal limit to a close friend. I feared they'd think I was being irrational. But as I stuttered through my explanation, I saw something unexpected: empathy in their eyes. I learned that being clear and assertive doesn't come off as aggressive. Instead, it fosters understanding and paves the way for healthier interactions. Expressing boundaries should be straightforward and kind, focusing on your needs rather than the other person's potential offenses. It's about saying, "This is what I need to feel comfortable and safe," and less about dictating how others should act. Just as critical is respecting the boundaries of others. This dance of mutual respect started making more sense to me through real-world examples. I recall a time when a colleague confided their need for uninterrupted work hours. Recognizing and honoring their boundary fostered trust and better collaboration. By respecting others' boundaries, we show that we value them as individuals and not just what they can offer us. It's always enlightening to ask questions and listen actively without judgment. Thoughtfully observing and adhering to someone's set limits conveys that we care about their well-being, nurturing a genuinely supportive environment. A small, practical step I've found invaluable is the pause and consider method. Whenever I'm about to agree to something or ask something of someone else, I take a brief moment to reflect. Will this infringe on my boundaries? Am I considering the other person's limits? This simple pause can prevent unnecessary strain and foster more thoughtful, considered interactions. Resolving conflict with compassion. I remember a time when I had a trivial disagreement with a close friend. We had different opinions about a project at work, and it started to strain our relationship. I could sense the tension rising, and I knew I needed to do something. Instead of reacting defensively, I decided to pause and really listen to her perspective. It dawned on me that she wasn't attacking my idea. She was simply expressing her own thoughts and concerns. We both cared deeply about our project and our friendship. By approaching the situation with compassion and empathy, we were able to have a heartfelt conversation that restored our bond and improved our collaboration. I found that the key to effective communication during conflicts is to remain calm and open-minded. It's easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment and say things we don't mean. However, taking a step back and allowing ourselves to listen can make a world of difference. I recall another instance where I accidentally hurt a colleague's feelings. Instead of dismissing her reaction, I asked her to share how she felt. Her openness allowed me to understand the impact of my words. I apologized sincerely, and we discussed ways to communicate better in the future. This experience taught me the power of acknowledgement and how it can pave the way for mutual respect and understanding. One practical tip I'd like to share is to practice active listening. When someone is speaking, give them your full attention. Show empathy by nodding or using phrases like "I understand" or "that makes sense." Try to see the situation from their perspective. This fosters a sense of being heard and valued. It's also helpful to express your feelings without blaming the other person. Use I statements such as "I feel upset" when instead of "you always make me feel upset." This approach encourages a dialogue rather than defensiveness. By implementing these strategies, we can transform conflicts into opportunities for deeper connections and personal growth. Chapter 5: Communication in Personal Relationships. Effective communication in romantic relationships. I've always found that one of the biggest hurdles in romantic relationships is navigating the often intricate maze of communication. It's this delicate dance where messages can get tangled and intentions misunderstood. It's why, despite immense love, couples can find themselves frustrated, feeling unacknowledged, or simply not on the same page. Each person comes with a unique set of past experiences, communication styles, and emotional triggers, making it crucial to recognize these factors and manage them thoughtfully. During the early days of my relationship, I learned the hard way that simply talking wasn't enough. It wasn't uncommon for my partner and me to spend hours in discussions that felt like they led nowhere. We both had our ways of expressing frustration and seeking validation. I remember one particular evening when a simple disagreement over dinner plans spiraled into a heated argument. We were both speaking, but neither of us was truly listening. It was a turning point for me. I realized we needed a better approach to understand each other. One strategy that significantly improved our communication was the practice of active listening. It's an art I wish I had known earlier in my relationship. Instead of preparing a rebuttal while my partner spoke, I learned to truly hear his words and acknowledge his feelings. By focusing on his expressions and body language, I could respond more empathetically. This not only diffused tensions, but also created moments of genuine connection. For instance, when he talked about his stress at work, I resisted the urge to offer solutions immediately. Instead, I validated his feelings, which in turn made him feel seen and heard. We also discovered the importance of timing. Choosing the right moment to have deeper conversations can make a world of difference. Addressing sensitive topics when either of us was tired, hungry, or stressed was almost always a recipe for disaster. So, we started scheduling e-talk times, where we would sit with no distractions and focus solely on our conversation. This intentional approach allowed us to delve into our issues constructively, without the external pressures of our daily lives weighing us down. Communication is a skill that requires ongoing effort and patience. We dedicated time to learning about each other's communication preferences and emotional needs. Through trial and error, we found a rhythm that worked for us. Some days, it meant taking a step back and giving each other space. Other times, it involved honest and sometimes uncomfortable conversations that were crucial for our growth as a couple. An invaluable tip I can share is the power of using I statements. Rather than saying, "You never listen to me," which can come off accusatory, phrasing it as, I feel unheard when my concerns are dismissed, often opens up a more productive dialogue. It shifts the focus from blaming to expressing personal feelings, which can soften defensive reactions and promote understanding. Ultimately, every relationship is unique, and what works for one couple may not work for another. But the essence remains the same: prioritizing communication with empathy, patience, and a genuine desire to understand one another is key. Small steps forward collectively lead to nurturing a bond that transcends superficial misunderstandings, fostering a connection grounded in mutual respect and love. Parent-child communication. One of the most profound moments in my life was when I realized how much my words and actions influenced my child's thoughts and feelings. It struck me that effective communication isn't just about what we say, but also how we say it. Children are incredibly perceptive. They pick up on tone, body language, and even the subtlest of facial expressions. This realization underscored the importance of establishing a foundation built on trust and understanding with my child. Open and honest dialogue fosters a sense of security and belonging, allowing children to develop emotional resilience and self-esteem. It's like building a bridge that connects two worlds, providing a safe passage for thoughts, fears, and dreams to travel freely between parent and child. There are several techniques that can significantly enhance communication with children. One powerful method is active listening. I remember a time when my child was trying to share a story with me while I was preoccupied with my phone. The look of disappointment on their face taught me that giving undivided attention is crucial. By putting away distractions and truly listening, I was able to understand not just the words but the emotions behind them. Another technique involves expressing empathy. Once, after my child came home upset from school, rather than dismissing their feelings or trying to solve the problem immediately, I simply acknowledged their emotions by saying, "It sounds like you had a really tough day." This simple act of validation made them feel heard and valued, opening the door to a more in-depth conversation about their experiences. Building stronger bonds also involves sharing personal stories and experiences. I often tell my child about my own childhood, the mistakes I made, and how I learned from them. This not only provides valuable lessons, but also makes them feel more connected to me. Using positive reinforcement is another key strategy. Celebrating achievements, no matter how small, fosters a sense of accomplishment and encourages open communication. One evening, after my child successfully completed a challenging homework assignment, I made sure to express how proud I was of their effort and perseverance. This boosted their confidence and motivated them to keep sharing their academic journey with me. Ultimately, improving communication and building stronger bonds is about creating a nurturing environment where children feel respected, understood, and loved. The stronger the bond, the more effectively we can guide them through life's challenges and joys. Navigating difficult conversations with friends and family. Growing up, I often found myself tiptoeing around certain topics with my family, avoiding conversations that felt too difficult or too likely to cause friction. It's a common experience, isn't it? The desire to keep the peace sometimes leads us to avoid the very conversations that might actually deepen our understanding of each other. Over time, I've learned that developing skills to navigate these challenging conversations is essential. It starts with a mix of self-awareness, empathy, and the courage to be vulnerable. When we approach difficult topics, it's important to first acknowledge our own emotions and triggers. By doing this, we prepare ourselves to engage without becoming overly defensive or hurtful. One of the most profound strategies I've discovered is the power of active listening. When we're fully present in a conversation, listening not just to the words, but to the emotions behind them, we create a space where the other person feels seen and heard. This doesn't mean we have to agree, but it does mean we need to respect their perspective. When my brother and I had a heated debate over our differing political views, I learned to listen to his experiences that shaped his beliefs, rather than just focusing on countering his points. This shift from debating to understanding can transform a hostile exchange into a constructive dialogue. Maintaining healthy relationships while navigating conflicts requires a balance of honesty and kindness. It's crucial to express our own needs and boundaries clearly. At the same time, we must be willing to compromise and seek solutions that honor both parties. For instance, my close friend and I once had a major fallout over a misunderstanding. It was only through calm, honest conversations that we managed to restore our relationship. We each took turns speaking and consciously avoided blame language, focusing instead on how we felt and what we needed to move forward. In difficult situations, it can be helpful to establish ground rules for discussions. Simple agreements, like not interrupting, avoiding sarcasm, and taking breaks if emotions run too high, can create a safer environment for both parties. This approach helped my family when discussing deeply emotional topics like our financial struggles. Instead of devolving into shouting matches, we agreed on these rules and found that our conversations were more respectful and productive. One practical tip I've adopted is to frame difficult conversations with I statements rather than you statements. This small linguistic shift reduces feelings of attack and blame. For example, saying I feel upset when instead of you always can make a significant difference. Through practice and patience, these skills become more natural and can profoundly impact our relationships, making them more resilient and closer than before. Chapter 6: Effective Communication in the Workplace. Managing conflict at work. When we think about workplace conflicts, most of us recall a heated argument, a misunderstanding, or even those awkward moments of silence filling the entire room. But what if I told you that effective communication could turn these challenging situations around? Picture this. A few years back, I found myself entangled in a series of disagreements with a colleague. We both had strong opinions, and it felt like we were on completely different wavelengths. While I was frustrated, I also recognized that our conflict was affecting the team's morale and productivity. I started by addressing our communication gaps head-on. We sat down over coffee and shared our perspectives openly. It wasn't easy at first, emotions were high, and there was a lot of misunderstanding to untangle. But I consciously focused on listening rather than preparing my counterarguments. We used I statements to express our feelings. I feel frustrated when deadlines are missed instead of you never meet deadlines. This shift in communication style made a world of difference. Before we knew it, we weren't just resolving our conflict, we were developing mutual respect. Moving beyond understanding the role of communication, let's delve into strategies for constructively addressing conflicts. Picture a bustling office, a team member you frequently butt heads with, and a pile of unresolved issues. How do you turn this around? One approach is to create an environment where everyone feels safe to express their thoughts without fear of retaliation. It's about instilling confidence that conflicts can lead to growth rather than just disruption. I remember a particular instance where a team member was consistently late with their deliverables, causing a ripple effect of delays and frustration. Instead of addressing the issue in a confrontational manner, I initiated a one-on-one discussion, expressing empathy and a genuine desire to understand the root cause. We discovered that the workload distribution was uneven, and we needed better time management tools. Together, we implemented changes that alleviated the problem, fostering a more collaborative atmosphere. Creating a positive work environment hinges on these open, honest dialogues. It's about nurturing relationships where feedback is not seen as criticism, but as a stepping stone towards improvement. Encouraging team-building activities and open forums for discussion can significantly enhance trust and camaraderie among team members. Through my journey, I've learned that conflicts, when managed well, can pave the way for innovation and stronger team bonds. Next time you find yourself in a workplace conflict, remember that it is an opportunity in disguise. Approach it with empathy, open-mindedness, and a genuine desire to communicate effectively. After all, the heart of conflict resolution lies in understanding and compassion, which can transform even the most challenging situations into pathways for growth. The art of persuasive communication. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you badly needed to convince someone to see things your way? Maybe it's a colleague at work who simply doesn't understand why your project plan is the best option. Or perhaps it's your boss who needs to be persuaded to approve your ideas for the next big client presentation. We have all been there. Effective communication that persuades and influences involves deploying various techniques to get your point across successfully. One key technique I have found invaluable is listening to understand rather than to respond. There is something incredibly disarming about someone who genuinely listens. It is like holding up a mirror to their thoughts and reflecting them back. When people feel heard, they become open and more receptive. Learning to use persuasive language can transform how you communicate your ideas. I remember a time at my previous job when I had to present a proposal to a skeptical team. I chose my words carefully, focusing on the benefits and how the changes would positively impact everyone involved. Instead of saying, "We need to change our process," I approached it with, "Imagine how much time we could save if we tried this new approach." Framing your ideas in a way that aligns with the interests and values of your audience can be very powerful. Logical arguments also play a critical role. When you present clear, well-structured arguments supported by data, you're more likely to convince your audience. Once, during a strategy meeting, I used statistics and research findings to back up my points. The concrete evidence made my arguments irrefutable and led to the acceptance of my proposal. Emotional appeals shouldn't be underestimated either. They're not about manipulating emotions, but about connecting on a human level. I experienced this firsthand while working on a project that required significant change management. Sharing a personal story about how I had previously overcome similar challenges helped bridge the gap. The team could relate to my story, and it made them feel that they, too, could navigate the changes. Empathy surfaced, and suddenly, the resistance melted away. Being genuinely compassionate and connecting emotions to your message can help in building trust and rapport, the key elements of persuasive communication. Remember, being persuasive isn't about being domineering. It's about being understanding and relatable. Increasing your capability in these techniques will not just help you in the short term, but they are practices that will serve you well throughout your career. Start observing how effective communicators around you navigate persuasive discussions, take note, and think about how you can incorporate these techniques into your conversations. The art of persuasion is about crafting a message that resonates on a logical, emotional, and mutual understanding level. What comes next will naturally flow from there. Building a positive work environment. When I think back to my first job, I remember walking into a space that felt incredibly intimidating. The communication at that place was sparse, and I often felt lost in the shuffle. This experience made me realize how pivotal communication is in fostering an inclusive and positive work environment. Poor communication can create confusion, breed misunderstandings, and ultimately, generate a toxic atmosphere where no one feels valued. On the flip side, transparent, open, and respectful communication fosters a sense of belonging and respect. It invites everyone to the table as equals and makes sure voices are heard and appreciated. Effective communication isn't just about the words exchanged, but also about the tone, body language, and responsiveness. I've noticed that leaders who actively listen and respond empathetically tend to have teams that are more engaged and loyal. When employees feel understood and valued, they are more likely to contribute their best work. Creating a space where people feel safe to express themselves without fear of judgment or repercussions is the cornerstone of an inclusive workplace. This openness not only enhances individual satisfaction, but also drives collective success, turning a group of individuals into a cohesive team. In my journey, I've come to realize that promoting collaboration requires intentionality. It's about setting the stage for teamwork right from the get-go. One strategy that stands out is the regular use of collaborative platforms, where ideas and feedback can flow freely. Whether it's through team meetings, brainstorming sessions, or daily stand-ups, consistently practicing collaborative communication encourages everyone to participate. It's also essential to recognize and celebrate both individual and team achievements. This not only boosts morale, but also reinforces the value of teamwork. Mutual respect is the bedrock upon which all healthy communication is built. It involves acknowledging and valuing each person's unique experiences and perspectives. Implementing simple practices like active listening, encouraging diverse viewpoints, and providing constructive feedback fosters an environment of mutual respect. I've found that when people feel respected, they're more likely to respect others in return, creating a positive cycle that uplifts the entire team. By embracing these strategies, we don't just enhance communication, but also build a culture of trust and camaraderie, where every individual feels empowered to contribute. Chapter 7. Overcoming Barriers to Communication. Dealing with Misunderstandings. Misunderstandings in communication often stem from a variety of sources, each with the potential to impact our relationships in significant ways. One common cause is the lack of clarity in expressing thoughts and feelings. I remember a time when I intended to show support to a friend going through a tough situation. I said, "I understand what you're going through." To me, it was a gesture of empathy. Unfortunately, my friend interpreted it as me belittling their unique experience, which led to tension between us. This experience taught me that vague statements can easily be misconstrued, especially if the listener's emotional state is fragile. Misunderstandings also arise from differences in individual perspectives and backgrounds. We all carry our unique sets of experiences, cultural backgrounds, and personal beliefs. These differences influence how we interpret messages. I've often found myself surprised at how a simple comment can be taken in an entirely different direction than I intended. It's crucial to be aware that what seems clear to us might not be clear to the other person. Then there's nonverbal communication, which can be a source of confusion. I once had a heated exchange with a colleague simply because they mistook my silence for agreement. In reality, I was thinking through my response carefully. Our body language, facial expressions, and even silence play a significant role in how our messages are received and can lead to misunderstandings if not properly aligned with our words. To deal with these misunderstandings, developing strategies to clarify our intentions is essential. One approach that's worked for me is being explicit about my intentions. Instead of saying, "I understand what you're going through," I learn to elaborate, "I can only imagine how tough this is for you, and I want you to know I'm here to support you in any way I can." This leaves less room for misinterpretation. It's equally important to seek clarification when you're on the receiving end of communication. Phrases like, "Can you explain what you mean by that?" Or "I want to make sure I understood you correctly. Are you saying that?" can clear up confusion before it escalates into a full-blown misunderstanding. One particularly effective strategy I've adopted is active listening. This involves giving my full attention to the speaker, making eye contact, and responding with nods or brief affirmations. It shows that I'm engaged and making an effort to understand their point of view. By summarizing what they've said and reflecting it back, I can ensure we're on the same page. It's a simple yet powerful way to show empathy and validate the other person's feelings, fostering a more open and honest dialogue. When misunderstandings do occur, resolving them promptly and effectively is crucial. I remember a project meeting that spiraled out of control because of miscommunication. Voices were raised, feelings were hurt, and productivity took a nosedive. Recognizing that a misunderstanding had occurred, I took the initiative to address it. I reached out to each team member individually, apologized for any confusion, and sought their perspective on how we could move forward. This took time, but the result was a better functioning team. Apologizing when we're wrong, even partially, can go a long way in resolving misunderstandings. It demonstrates humility and a willingness to mend the relationship. It's also helpful to create an environment where open communication is encouraged. Regular check-ins and a culture of feedback can preempt many misunderstandings by addressing small issues before they snowball into larger problems. In the end, dealing with misunderstandings isn't just about resolving conflicts, but about building stronger, more resilient relationships. A key takeaway is to always assume positive intent. More often than not, misunderstandings arise from miscommunication rather than malice. This mindset encourages a more forgiving and constructive approach, allowing us to focus on resolution rather than recrimination. Cultural and language barriers. Communication plays such a pivotal role in our lives, yet we often underestimate the complexities involved, especially when different cultures and languages come into play. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you said something you thought was completely harmless, but it was received with awkward silence or confusion? It's like my first day at an international conference. I was paired with a colleague from Japan for a networking activity. Eager to break the ice, I made what I thought was a humorous remark. Instead of laughter, I got a polite nod and silence. Only later did I learn that my intended joke touched on a topic that's considered sensitive in their culture. This experience taught me an important lesson about cultural sensitivity. Different cultures have different norms, values, and customs that influence how people interpret communication. What might be considered a casual remark in one culture can be perceived as offensive in another. In addition, nonverbal cues like gestures, facial expressions, and tone of voice vary widely across cultures. A thumbs up might be a sign of approval in one culture, but in another, it might mean something entirely different. Being aware of these nuances is critical to avoiding misunderstandings and developing successful communication. Language barriers add another layer of complexity. Imagine trying to convey a technical concept when your vocabulary in the other person's language is limited. It's like trying to paint a detailed picture with only a handful of colors. When I first started working with a team from South America, I quickly realized my high school Spanish wasn't going to cut it. I was often misunderstood, and I struggled to understand feedback. That's when I decided to invest time in learning the language better. Not only did my communication improve, but I also earned the trust and respect of my colleagues. They appreciated my effort to bridge the gap. Developing cultural competence is like opening a door to new perspectives and deeper relationships. It's not just about learning the do's and don'ts of various cultures, but about understanding the underlying reasons. Why do people from some cultures avoid direct eye contact? Why is punctuality so crucial in some places, but flexible in others? Digging deeper into these questions helps you appreciate the rich tapestry of human interaction. When I started to ask more questions and listen actively, I discovered so much about the diverse ways people see the world. It made me more empathetic and adaptable. Language sensitivity goes beyond merely knowing words and grammar. It's about being attuned to the nuances of how language is used. In some languages, for instance, the use of formal versus informal address can make a big difference in how you're perceived. When a Russian colleague addressed me formally until I invited them to switch to informal speech, I realized how deeply ingrained these distinctions are in their culture. Paying attention to such details shows respect and facilitates smoother communication. The journey to overcoming cultural and language barriers is ongoing and ever-evolving. While it's impossible to master every culture and language, the willingness to learn and adapt makes all the difference. One practical tip I've found immensely helpful is to approach every interaction with an open mind and a genuine curiosity. It turns every conversation into an opportunity for learning and connection, making communication not just effective, but enriching for everyone involved. Addressing emotional barriers in communication. We've all been there, caught in a conversation that's derailed by a flood of emotions. It could be a heated debate or a heart-to-heart talk that suddenly hits a wall. Our emotions, those internal whirlwinds, play a crucial role in how we connect with others. Emotions can act as both bridges and barriers in communication, influencing the words we choose and how we perceive what's being said. When we're angry, we might speak more aggressively, while sadness can make our tone softer, but filled with raw vulnerability. Understanding these emotional undercurrents helps us navigate conversations more effectively, making us not only better listeners, but also more empathetic speakers. However, it's easier said than done. Managing emotional barriers requires an internal awareness akin to having a conversation with ourselves before addressing someone else. This means recognizing emotions as they arise instead of letting them boil over uncontrollably. Imagine a colleague who consistently misses deadlines. Instead of blurting out in frustration, taking a moment to process that irritation can help in calmly expressing concerns, making it more likely for the colleague to be receptive rather than defensive. This self-management, though challenging, can transform potential conflict into constructive dialogue. To express emotions constructively, think of emotions as tools rather than obstacles. One effective technique is to use I statements, which shift the focus from blaming to sharing your perspective. For instance, saying "I feel concerned when deadlines are missed because it affects our project timeline" is less accusatory than "you always miss deadlines." This not only reduces the chances of the other person feeling attacked, but opens a gateway for genuine conversation. Moreover, it's vital to foster an environment where open dialogue is encouraged. This means inviting feedback, asking open-ended questions, and being willing to listen. Respectful engagement can bridge the emotional divide, helping everyone feel heard and understood. Creating an atmosphere conducive to open dialogue involves more than just words. It's about body language, tone, and timing as well. Nonverbal cues often speak louder than our words. A comforting touch, a nod, even maintaining eye contact can reassure the other person that you're genuinely engaged. Furthermore, choosing the right moment to talk is paramount. Addressing sensitive issues when emotions are high often backfires. Instead, suggesting a time to discuss matters later, when both parties have had time to cool down, can make a significant difference. Chapter 8. Mastering Public Speaking. Preparing and organizing your speech. When I first began speaking in front of groups, I discovered that preparation and organization were my secret weapons. Imagine standing in front of an audience, feeling both nervous and excited. What helped me overcome that trepidation was breaking down the daunting task of public speaking into manageable steps. Begin by knowing your audience. For some, this means understanding their demographics, such as their age, occupation, or interests. For others, it might mean learning about the kinds of challenges they face daily. Doing this creates a link between you and your listeners, transforming your speech from a monologue into a conversation. Next, lay the groundwork for your speech. This involves crafting a clear and inspiring message. What's the main point you want to convey? Think of this like planting a seed. Your speech should cultivate and nurture this key message throughout. I found that using personal anecdotes or stories from my life made my speeches more relatable and engaging. These narratives aren't just filler. They illustrate your points and help your audience connect emotionally, turning abstract ideas into something tangible. With your message in mind, it's crucial to develop a structure. Imagine your speech as a journey that you and your audience embark on together. You need a starting point, a series of stops along the way, and a destination. Start by outlining your introduction, body, and conclusion. The introduction should hook your audience, perhaps with a provocative question or a surprising fact. As for the body, aim for clarity and logical progression. State your main points with supporting evidence, using subheadings or bullet points in your notes to keep things organized. Finally, your conclusion should tie everything together, leaving a lasting impression. Incorporating visuals can profoundly impact how your message is perceived. Think about the last TED Talk you watched. Did it include engaging slides, videos, or props? Effective visuals can emphasize your points and keep your audience's attention. When preparing slides, simplicity is key. Avoid clutter and opt for bold, clear visuals that complement your words rather than compete with them. I remember being mesmerized by a speaker who used a single image per slide, each one evocative and perfectly timed with their narrative. Lastly, interacting with your audience is essential. Whether through rhetorical questions, inviting participation, or simply making eye contact, engagement transforms passive listening into active learning. I recall a time when I asked my audience to share their experiences at certain points in my presentation. This didn't just make the session interactive, it made the content more relatable and memorable. The room felt alive with empathy and shared understanding. Remembering these steps, knowing your audience, crafting a clear message, structuring your speech, using effective visuals, and engaging with your listeners, can turn the intimidating prospect of public speaking into a rewarding experience. And trust me, every time you practice these elements, you get better, your confidence grows, and soon, you'll look forward to every opportunity to share your voice. Engaging your audience. From my own experience, one of the most critical challenges during a presentation is to capture and maintain the audience's attention. It's like juggling. It's not just about throwing all the balls in the air, but catching and holding onto them as well. I found that the way you start can set the tone for the entire presentation. Whether it's a surprising fact, a provocative question, or a visual that captivates, engaging your audience right from the get-go makes a big difference. An often overlooked, yet tremendously effective method, is making eye contact. When I look into the eyes of the people I'm speaking to, it's as though we're having a one-on-one conversation, and that personal connection tends to draw them in deeper. Also, incorporating pauses strategically helps emphasize points and gives the audience moments to absorb information. It's much like a well-composed piece of music, where silence is as important as sound. Storytelling is a powerful tool in any presenter's arsenal. Reflecting on some of my more memorable presentations, I noticed they often included a story that resonated with the audience. Stories humanize content, making it relatable and easier to digest. For instance, I once shared an anecdote about a project that failed spectacularly, but then delved into the lessons learned and eventual success. This not only made the presentation more engaging, but also established an emotional connection with the audience, showing them that failure is an opportunity for growth. Humor, when used appropriately, can lighten the atmosphere and make the subject matter more approachable. It's not about cracking jokes non-stop, but rather about finding those moments where a bit of levity can disarm and charm your listeners. And let's not forget the power of questions. Open-ended questions that prompt discussion can turn a monologue into a conversation, keeping the audience actively engaged and enabling them to take part in the narrative. One of the most effective ways I've found to keep the audience engaged is through interactive elements. I remember a presentation where I incorporated a simple live poll and the energy in the room changed instantly. People started interacting not just with me, but with each other. This interaction made the content more tangible and relevant. Similarly, including hands-on activities or real-time demonstrations can break the monotony of just talking and allow the audience to experience the topic in a much more immersive way. Visual aids also play a crucial role. Instead of cluttered slides filled with text, simple and dynamic visuals can easily convey complex ideas. It's amazing how a well-placed diagram or an engaging video clip can make the information stick. A practical piece of advice I always adhere to is making sure all technology is tested before the presentation. There's nothing more disengaging than technical difficulties that disrupt the flow and lose your audience's interest. Overcoming public speaking anxiety. Public speaking anxiety is something that has affected me far more deeply than I ever imagined. I remember the first time I stood up in front of a crowd to talk. My heart raced, my palms were sweaty, and my mind went completely blank. It's a sensation that's all too familiar to many of us. The root causes of this anxiety can vary widely. For some, it might be fear of judgment, while for others it could be a lack of self-confidence or past negative experiences. These feelings can manifest in a variety of symptoms: shortness of breath, trembling hands, a shaky voice, or even full-blown panic attacks. I realized early on that the impact of this anxiety on my performance was significant. It wasn't just a matter of feeling uncomfortable, it genuinely hindered my ability to convey my message effectively, leaving me feeling frustrated and defeated. As I delved deeper into understanding my own fears, I discovered techniques that transformed my approach to public speaking. One of the most powerful strategies I learned was deep breathing. Before every presentation, I take a few minutes to breathe deeply, calming my nerves and reducing physical tension. Visualization also played a critical role. I began to picture myself successfully delivering my talk, imagining the audience's positive reactions, which built up my confidence. Practicing mindfulness helped me become more present and less anxious about future outcomes. I also found that preparing extensively reduced my anxiety. Having a structured outline gave me a roadmap, and rehearsing multiple times made the material second nature. Furthermore, I incorporated small, gradual exposures to speaking opportunities, starting with smaller groups and building up to larger audiences. This systematic desensitization gradually chipped away at the overwhelming fear I once felt. Another breakthrough came when I shifted my mindset from focusing on myself to concentrating on the value I could provide to my audience. Instead of worrying about how I was being perceived, I started thinking about the information I was sharing. This mental shift helped me feel less self-conscious and more engaged with my listeners. Interestingly, I also began to embrace mistakes as part of the process. Each stumble became a learning opportunity rather than a failure. Understanding that even seasoned speakers can err took some pressure off my perfectionist tendencies. As a practical tip, one thing that has consistently helped me is connecting with at least one person in the audience. Eye contact and a genuine smile can create a sense of rapport and make the entire experience feel more like a conversation than a speech. Chapter 9: The Impact of Digital Communication. Navigating Social Media Communication. Understanding the challenges and opportunities of communication through social media platforms has been a journey for me. It feels like I've been on an emotional roller coaster, trying to figure out how to navigate this complex digital world. The immediacy of social media can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it allows us to connect with people across the globe in real time, providing an incredible opportunity to share ideas and create communities. On the other hand, this same immediacy can lead to misunderstandings, conflicts, and stress. I remember once posting a comment meant to be lighthearted, but it was taken out of context and spiraled into a negative thread. The lesson I learned was the importance of clarity and empathy in every interaction. Social media presents the opportunity to build your personal brand and professional network, but it also exposes you to different kinds of risks, such as cyberbullying and privacy breaches. Once, a friend of mine had their account hacked, and the hacker posted inappropriate content. It was a nightmare for them, trying to regain control and repair their reputation. Despite these challenges, the potential for positive impact is immense. When used wisely, social media can amplify voices that otherwise might not be heard, and it can be a powerful tool for advocacy and change. Exploring strategies for effective and responsible use of social media, in both personal and professional contexts, is crucial. Setting boundaries is the first strategy one adopted. For example, I make it a point to avoid scrolling through my feeds first thing in the morning or right before bed. This helps me maintain a healthy mental space and start and end my day positively. Another strategy is curating your feed to include content that enriches you. Following accounts that inspire, educate, and align with your values can turn social media into a positive force in your life. In a professional context, one strategy that has always worked for me is maintaining a consistent and authentic voice. Whether you're a freelancer, entrepreneur, or someone growing their personal brand, being genuine in your interactions builds trust and credibility. For instance, I once shared a post about a professional setback and how I overcame it. The response was overwhelmingly positive, as others related to my experience and appreciated the honesty. It's also important to engage responsibly with others. Think before you click like or share, and always verify the credibility of your sources. A mentor once told me, "Your digital footprint is permanent. Make sure it reflects the best version of yourself." This advice has stayed with me and guides how I interact online. By focusing on empathy, clarity, and responsibility, you can make social media a space that enhances both personal and professional aspects of your life. The art of email etiquette. Crafting professional and effective emails that convey messages clearly and respectfully is essential in today's digital age. Remember the first time you received an email filled with jargon and confusing language? Frustrating, wasn't it? From that moment, I realized how imperative it is to make my emails precise and unambiguous. Every time I sit down to write an email, I start by being clear about the purpose. Am I giving information, asking a question, or perhaps resolving a misunderstanding? By clearly understanding my objective, I can ensure every sentence I write adds value and stays on point. But here's the catch: clarity isn't just about the choice of words. It's also about structure. I always break down the message into digestible parts: a beginning that introduces the topic, a middle that elaborates, and an end that concludes with next steps or a polite sign-off. Think about the recipient's perspective. They're likely scanning through an influx of emails, so the more concise and structured your email is, the better it will be received. I remember sending out a chaotic, long-winded email once, and it backfired. I had to follow up with explanations, wasting everyone's time. That experience taught me the invaluable lesson of brevity and clarity. Understanding the significance of tone, clarity, and proper etiquette in email communication cannot be overstated. Imagine receiving an email from your colleague that sounds abrupt or overly formal. It's likely to leave you puzzled or even upset. My go-to approach? Strive for a friendly yet professional tone. Picture the recipient. What kind of language and tone would resonate with them? I once adopted a too casual tone in an email to a senior executive, and it led to an awkward conversation. Since then, I always gauge the tone based on the relationship and past interactions with the person. And let's not forget etiquette. Simple acts like addressing the person by their name, saying please and thank you, and proofreading your email for errors can make a significant difference. Not only do these small steps demonstrate respect, but they also convey your professionalism. Using technology to enhance communication. HTML. Imagine a world where a single device connected you to everyone you care about, regardless of the miles separating you. Today, we're already living in that world thanks to the multitude of technological tools and platforms available to us. I remember vividly the first time I used video conferencing to connect with a childhood friend who had moved overseas. It was like having a coffee chat in a quaint cafe, despite the ocean between us. Tools like Zoom, Skype, and FaceTime have made these moments possible for all of us, turning once costly international calls into everyday conversations with just a few taps on our screens. Then, there are asynchronous communication platforms like Slack and Microsoft Teams that have transformed workplace interactions. There's a kind of magic in being able to shoot off a message or a file to a coworker and have them pick it up whenever they're able, without disrupting their focus. The ability to share documents, brainstorm ideas, and keep track of ongoing projects in one place has had an enormous impact on productivity. I recall a pivotal project where Slack's integrated channels allowed every team member to stay in the loop, substantially reducing the back-and-forth emails and inefficiencies. It felt as if we were all working in the same room, even though half the team was distributed across different continents. Central to leveraging these technologies is knowing how to use them best. It's one thing to have the latest gadget or software, it's another to exploit it to its fullest potential. Setting up norms and boundaries is key. For instance, in our team, we established quiet hours on communication tools to respect personal time, inspired by the realization that endless notifications could lead to burnout. This balance is critical, and being mindful of when and how to use these tools can greatly enhance productivity and connection. One of the most profound experiences I've had was when we incorporated virtual whiteboards into our operations. Miro became our go-to platform for creating mind maps and workflow diagrams. It bridged a gap, making remote brainstorming as effective as in-person sessions. It fostered a sense of inclusion because everyone could contribute simultaneously, a luxury not always afforded in physical meetings. The interconnectedness these tools offer is more than technical. It's deeply human, bringing people closer, fostering understanding, and enabling genuine collaboration. It's stunning how thoughtfully integrating technology into our lives can make communication fluid and more personal. As we navigate this digital age, remember that these tools are here to serve us, to enhance our capabilities, and most importantly, to connect us in moments big and small. Chapter 10: Communication for Personal Development. Goal Setting Through Effective Communication. Understanding the role of effective communication in setting and achieving personal goals is both transformative and empowering. I've found that the very act of articulating a goal can make a world of difference. It's one thing to have a fuzzy idea in mind, but when you turn that thought into words, whether written or spoken, it becomes real and actionable. Think back to the last time you told someone about an ambition or a dream. Didn't saying it out loud make it feel more attainable? There's an unmistakable magic in communication that turns thoughts into tangible objectives. Furthermore, sharing your goals with others does more than just make them real. It creates a network of support and accountability. Personally, I've experienced that letting someone know what I aim to achieve builds a subtle pressure to follow through, which is immensely helpful. This is especially true when the person I share with can also offer valuable feedback or even join me in the pursuit of that goal. Imagine telling a friend about your plan to run a marathon. Their encouragement can boost your motivation, and their check-ins keep you on track. Learning techniques for clarity, motivation, and accountability through goal-oriented communication has been a game changer. Clarity emerged as the most crucial element. I've realized that being specific about what I want cuts through the noise. It's like turning on a flashlight in a dark room. Suddenly, I know exactly where to step next. Instead of saying, "I want to be healthier," I say, "I will exercise for 30 minutes every morning." This clarity sets a clear path and makes it easier to track my progress. Motivation, on the other hand, is often fueled by the language we use. Positive affirmations and a future-focused dialogue can ignite a fire within. When I articulate my goals as if they are already on their way to being achieved, it fills me with a sense of inevitability and excitement. Phrases like, "I am becoming more fit" resonate more powerfully than "I will try to get fit." The belief in my own words propels me forward. Accountability may seem daunting, but it's incredibly effective. Asking someone to help me stay accountable has led to genuine growth and progress. Telling a trusted friend or mentor about my milestones and deadlines creates an atmosphere where my commitments are respected, not just by others but by myself. During times when my motivation dips, knowing that someone will ask about my progress encourages me to push through slumps and stay on course. These insights are not just theoretical. They are experiences that have shaped my personal growth journey. Effective communication has been the cornerstone of setting and achieving goals, turning aspirations into accomplishments. Whether it's being clear about what I want, using positive language, or harnessing the power of accountability, these techniques have crafted a pathway to success. Share your goals, speak them into existence, and with every word, build the life you envision. Building self-confidence through communication. Words are potent tools. They weave the fabric of our interactions and help us shape our interior worlds. I recall a time when I struggled with self-confidence. The voice in my head was a critical one, constantly undermining my abilities and worth. It wasn't until someone pointed out how I communicated with myself that I began to see the extensive impact of words on my self-esteem. By reframing negative thoughts into positive affirmations, my internal dialogue shifted, and so did my confidence. When I started to communicate more compassionately with myself, I found that my self-esteem gradually rose. I remember vividly a day at work when I had to present in front of a senior team. My heart raced, and my mind was filled with doubts. But something changed when I practiced assertive communication. I told myself, "You are prepared. You've done this before. You can handle it." It felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Speaking firmly and with purpose not only conveyed confidence to my colleagues, but also reinforced it within me. The truth is, the more I practiced assertive communication, the more my self-doubt diminished. I've learned that it's not about being aggressive or domineering. It's about valuing my own voice and worth just as much as anyone else's. Overcoming self-doubt is a journey, one that has no straightforward path. Every step forward counts. Start with small acts of positive self-talk. Instead of saying, "I can't," try telling yourself, "I'm learning, and that's okay." This shift in language can transform the way we perceive challenges. For instance, I used to doubt my ability to pick up new skills quickly. By changing my inner dialogue to "I am capable of learning new things," I noticed an improvement in my approach to new tasks. It's about replacing that inner critic with a kind, yet realistic voice. Real growth happens with persistence. Constantly remind yourself that self-confidence doesn't develop overnight and that every small victory is progress. Try envisioning moments where you felt proud and brave, and let those memories fuel your current endeavors. Communication, both internal and external, shapes the narrative of our lives. Continue to nurture it with kindness and assertiveness. Remember, your words hold the power to build a resilient and confident self. The power of affirmations in communication. HTML. Communications is the thread that weaves the fabric of our social, personal, and professional lives. Yet, the power of what we say often goes beyond the content of our words. Picture a moment in your life when you spoke words of encouragement to a friend or a family member. Did you notice an uplift in their spirits or a smile that spread across their face? That's the magic of affirmations. By using affirmations, we can reshape not only our own mindset, but also the attitudes and emotions of those we interact with. These positive statements help us to strengthen our self-belief and motivation, creating a ripple effect that spreads positivity and encourages growth for everyone involved. The beauty of affirmations lies in their simplicity. When we incorporate them into our daily conversations, we can start to notice subtle yet significant changes. It's like planting seeds of positivity that eventually bloom into a garden of confidence and motivation. For instance, when I was going through a rough patch in my career, I started using affirmations like "I am capable of overcoming challenges, and every step I take is a step towards success." These affirmations didn't just transform my thoughts, they influenced my actions. Each day, I felt more empowered, more resilient, and more focused on my goals. The power of these affirmations radiated, influencing interactions with my colleagues and creating an environment of mutual support and encouragement. If you're wondering how to make affirmations a staple in your life, let me share some techniques that worked wonders for me. Start small. Incorporate a few positive statements into your morning routine, perhaps while you're brushing your teeth or making your breakfast. Keep them present and specific. Saying "I am capable" is powerful, but saying "I am capable of handling today's challenges" makes it relevant and immediate. Visualization can amplify the effect. When you say your affirmations, visualize yourself achieving what you want, vividly and confidently. Another helpful approach is to write them down. Place them where you can see them daily, like on your mirror or your computer screen. Words have power, but repetition gives them roots. By consistently using affirmations, you'll find that they start to shape your reality, infusing your communication and interactions with optimism and determination. Chapter 11. Mending Broken Communication. Rebuilding Trust After Communication Breakdowns. I remember vividly a time when our communication had broken down completely. It felt like navigating a labyrinth in the dark. I couldn't see the way out, and I definitely couldn't see a way to rebuild what we once had. In those moments, trust seemed like a distant, unattainable goal. But trust isn't lost in a single moment, nor is it rebuilt in one. The first step was recognizing the damage caused and understanding that both sides had been hurt. This acknowledgement was crucial. We were both feeling vulnerable and defensive, but admitting this vulnerability allowed us to start the healing process. We began by setting small, achievable goals. Transparency became our bedrock. We practiced it by sharing our feelings honestly, even the uncomfortable ones. It wasn't easy. I remember swallowing my pride many times to say how I genuinely felt instead of masking it with anger or indifference. Slowly but surely, these small steps began to accumulate, helping us rebuild the trust that had eroded. Alongside transparency, honesty and accountability played significant roles. We both had to hold ourselves accountable for our past mistakes without using them as weapons to hurt each other. This often meant listening, truly listening, without interrupting or getting defensive. I recall moments when it felt like walking on eggshells, but these conversations paved the way for understanding. Whenever I felt myself getting defensive, I'd remind myself that this wasn't about winning or losing. It was about striving for mutual respect and understanding. Effective communication techniques became the backbone of our rebuilding efforts. First, we learned the importance of timing. Addressing issues when we both were calm helped prevent escalation and misunderstandings. Another technique that proved invaluable was reflective listening. It involved actively listening to what the other person was saying, and then reflecting it back in our own words to ensure we truly understood their point of view. This practice reduced miscommunication significantly and increased our empathy for each other. We also adopted the use of I statements over you statements. Instead of saying, "You always ignore me," I'd say, "I feel ignored when my calls go unanswered." This subtle switch made a world of difference as it conveyed my feelings without placing blame, fostering a more empathetic and open dialogue. Building trust after a communication breakdown requires patience, persistence, and a lot of introspection. It's a journey of small, intentional steps towards a healthier relationship. If there's one lesson I've learned, it is that trust is not something we demand, but something we earn, step by step. Apologizing and forgiveness in communication. There was a time when my best friend and I hit a rough patch. I said something hurtful, jokingly at first, but it struck a nerve. The atmosphere between us became tense and uncomfortable. I quickly realized that a simple "I'm sorry" wouldn't cut it. Understanding the role of sincere apologies and forgiveness in repairing damaged relationships was a journey that began right there. When I looked into his eyes, it wasn't just about the words anymore. I had to convey that I genuinely understood his pain and regret hurting him. This wasn't just about uttering words, but connecting with his feelings and acknowledging the hurt I caused. What I learned from that experience was monumental. Sincere apologies are a powerful tool. It's more than just saying sorry, but about owning your mistake, recognizing the impact of your actions, and expressing a heartfelt desire to make amends. Interestingly, the act of seeking forgiveness goes hand in hand with offering it. When my friend forgave me, it wasn't just about relieving my guilt. It was a liberating act for both of us, allowing us to rebuild trust and move forward together. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it opens a door to a healthier, stronger relationship. As we navigated through this, I discovered techniques for offering genuine apologies. The first step was empathy. I had to see the situation from his perspective and understand his feelings. Then, through compassionate communication, I expressed my regret without making excuses. Phrases like, "I can see how my words hurt you," and "I wish I could take back what I said," helped bridge the emotional chasm. We engaged in an open dialogue where he expressed his feelings and I listened attentively, validating his emotions without defending myself. Being vulnerable during this conversation wasn't easy, but it was necessary for true reconciliation. Practicing forgiveness in communication, I realized, is equally vital. Fostering forgiveness starts with self-compassion. I had to forgive myself first for causing the rift. This personal forgiveness opened my heart to his pain, making it easier to forgive him for any reactive words he might have thrown my way. We made a pact to communicate more openly and honestly moving forward, appreciating the value of our friendship. By embracing forgiveness, we discovered a renewed depth in our relationship, proving that broken bonds can indeed be mended stronger than before. Reconnecting with estranged relationships. When it comes to reconnecting with estranged loved ones, effective communication is the cornerstone of the process. You could say it all started for me when I realized that misunderstanding and distance had created a chasm between my siblings and me. The first step in bridging that gap was to initiate open and honest conversations. I remember sitting down and crafting a heartfelt message, one that conveyed not just my desire to reconcile, but also acknowledged the pain and confusion that had led to our estrangement. It's vital to approach these conversations with empathy and without accusations. I learned that active listening played a significant role here. When a cousin and I finally got together for coffee after years of cold silence, I made a conscious effort to listen to her side of the story without interrupting. This allowed her to feel heard and understood, which is crucial in mending broken relationships. It's also essential to be patient and give the other person time and space to process the conversation. Another effective method I discovered was writing letters. Sometimes, face-to-face conversations can be overwhelming and emotionally charged. Writing allows you to express your feelings comprehensively, without the pressure of an immediate response. When I wrote to my father after years of no contact, it opened a door for us to slowly rebuild our relationship. The key is to keep the communication channels open and always come from a place of love and understanding. Once effective communication is established, the task of rebuilding bridges, repairing misunderstandings, and re-establishing meaningful connections begins. It starts with acknowledging past mistakes, owning up to your part in the estrangement, and showing a genuine willingness to change. I remember the first time I apologized to a dear friend for my role in our fallout. Admitting fault wasn't easy, but it laid the groundwork for mutual respect and forgiveness. Understanding the root causes of the misunderstandings is another critical step. Often, exploring the underlying issues requires delving into uncomfortable truths and acknowledging feelings of hurt, betrayal, or neglect from both sides. Following my reconciliation with my friend, we had long, candid discussions about what went wrong, which significantly helped in clearing the air. Thereafter, re-establishing meaningful connections requires consistent effort. It's not a one-time fix. Building trust and a new foundation of understanding takes time. For instance, with my brother, we decided to set up regular meetups and slowly rebuild the trust that had eroded. We started small, with casual outings, and gradually progressed to more meaningful engagements. The journey isn't always smooth, but the perseverance eventually pays off. Small gestures, random check-ins, and simple acts of kindness often go a long way in demonstrating your commitment to the renewed relationship. One final point I want to share is the importance of setting boundaries and respecting them. Sometimes, in the process of reconnecting, there might be a tendency to rush things or feel obligated to restore the relationship to its former state instantaneously. It's crucial to recognize and respect each other's pace. When my sister and I attempted to mend our relationship, we realized that we both needed different things from the process. For her, it was essential to take it slow, whereas I was eager to dive right back into being close siblings. By acknowledging each other's boundaries and needs, we managed to find a middle ground that worked for both of us. In your journey to reconnect with estranged loved ones, remember that every relationship is unique. What worked for me may not work for you. However, the principles of open communication, patience, empathy, and respect are universal. Take the time to truly understand both your feelings and those of the person you're reaching out to. Keep the lines of communication open, be patient, and show consistent effort in rebuilding the relationship. It can be a challenging journey, but reconnecting with estranged loved ones is often a deeply rewarding experience. The joy of mending a once broken relationship and the warmth of rekindled connections are invaluable. Chapter 12. Cultivating Listening Skills. Active Listening Techniques. When I think about the countless conversations I've had over the years, one truth stands out: being fully present can transform any interaction. It's easier said than done, though. There was a time when I found myself nodding along, while my mind was 1,000 miles away. Even when someone was sharing something deeply personal, I was often planning my next grocery run or wondering what to watch on Netflix. It took a heartfelt conversation with an old friend to make me realize the power of active listening. When she told me how much it meant to her that I was genuinely there, I knew I had to make a change. One technique that revolutionized my listening skills is the art of summarizing. After someone has shared their story, I make it a point to paraphrase what they've said. Not in a robotic, "so, what you're saying is," manner, but more naturally, like, "It sounds like that was really tough for you." It not only shows that I was paying attention, but it also allows the speaker to clarify any misunderstandings. I remember a time a colleague was venting about a difficult project and, by summarizing her frustrations back to her, we discovered an underlying issue that we could solve together. Another powerful tool is empathy. Truly putting myself in the other person's shoes helps me connect on a deeper level. I'll never forget the time a friend lost a parent and shared their grief with me. Instead of offering cliched condolences, I tried to feel their pain and responded with heartfelt understanding. That moment taught me more about connection than any book ever could. Distractions are the nemesis of active listening. I often found myself battling the urge to check my phone or let my mind wander when someone was talking. To combat this, I started practicing mindfulness. Before engaging in a conversation, I take a few deep breaths to center myself and remind myself of the importance of the moment. It's a small habit that makes a huge difference. Additionally, I discovered that maintaining good eye contact and nodding supportively can really enhance focus. These nonverbal cues signal to the speaker that I'm fully engaged, which in turn helps me stay attentive. A game-changing strategy I've adopted is active questioning. When someone is speaking, I try to ask open-ended questions. Instead of a simple "How was your day?" I'll ask, "What was the highlight of your day?" Or "What challenges did you face today?" These types of questions invite the speaker to delve deeper and share more, enriching the conversation and making it more meaningful. It reminds me of a time I asked a distant relative at a family gathering, "What's a project you're passionate about right now?" She lit up and shared stories of her volunteer work in such a way that we both felt more connected by the end of the night. Setting aside dedicated time for conversations can also be incredibly beneficial. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to fall into the trap of multitasking. I've learned to carve out specific times to catch up with loved ones or discuss important matters with colleagues, ensuring I'm not distracted by other tasks. This approach has significantly improved the quality of my interactions and the depth of my relationships. Remember, the most valuable gift we can offer in any conversation is our undivided attention. Next time you're in a discussion, try to truly listen, empathize, and engage. You'll find that not only does the speaker feel valued, but you'll also glean more insight and satisfaction from the exchange. The art of reflection and paraphrasing. There was a time when I thought I was a great listener. I would nod, make eye contact, and even offer a verbal hum at all the right moments. But it wasn't until someone genuinely mirrored my thoughts back to me that I understood the profound impact of reflection and paraphrasing. It felt like the person had stepped inside my mind, grasping every nuance of what I was trying to convey. This level of understanding isn't just validating. It strengthens the bond between people, making communication not just an exchange of words, but a meaningful connection. Reflecting and paraphrasing aren't just fancy communication tools. They are fundamental for ensuring accurate understanding and effective exchange of ideas. When we reflect, we're essentially holding up a mirror to the speaker's emotions and thoughts. This not only helps us grasp the essence of their message, but also signals to them that we value their words. Paraphrasing, on the other hand, involves rephrasing their message in our own words. It's like taking a delicate piece of craft, understanding its intricacies, and then molding it afresh. This process ensures that there's no misunderstanding or misinterpretation, facilitating a smoother dialogue. More often than not, people don't just want to be heard, they want to be understood, and these techniques are our tools to achieve that. I remember a conversation with a close friend who was going through a tough time. Rather than jumping in with advice or solutions, I focused on reflecting her feelings and paraphrasing her concerns. She poured out her frustrations, and I echoed back what I perceived. "It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed by the expectations at work, and it's making you question your capabilities." Her response was one of relief and gratitude. "Exactly, that's exactly how I feel." That moment reminded me that often, people aren't looking for answers, they seek understanding and empathy. By reflecting her emotions and rephrasing her thoughts, I demonstrated genuine active listening, making her feel truly heard and supported. To master the art of paraphrasing, it's essential to listen with intent. It's not just about hearing words, it's about understanding the underlying message. When someone shares an experience, we can respond by saying, "So, what you're saying is," and then rephrase their message in our own words. This can be particularly powerful in emotionally charged situations. For instance, if someone expresses frustration, an effective response could be, "You seem really frustrated because things didn't go as planned." This not only shows you understand them, but also helps in de-escalating their emotions. Empathy is the cornerstone here. It bridges the gap between hearing and truly listening. Our goal in any conversation should be to create a space where the other person feels safe and understood. This is especially crucial in personal relationships and professional environments alike. Reflecting and paraphrasing serve as our tools to convey empathy and ensure clear, effective communication. They enable us to validate others' emotions without necessarily agreeing with them, nurturing a genuine connection. When we take the time to reflect and paraphrase, we aren't just improving our listening skills, we're fostering a culture of understanding and support, one conversation at a time. Next time you're in a dialogue, practice these techniques and notice the difference. the clarity and connection you'll achieve can transform your interactions in ways you never thought possible. Becoming an empathetic listener. When I first began to realize the power of truly listening to others, I found myself on a crowded subway, observing the quiet exchanges of weary commuters. It struck me then how often we take for granted the act of listening. Not the passive hearing of words, but a deeper, more connected form of listening, one that demands empathy and compassion. I began to practice this consciously, and I can tell you, it transformed my interactions. Empathetic listening is the heart of meaningful communication. It's not just about hearing the words, but understanding the feelings behind them. This begins with a willingness to be present and a genuine interest in the other person's experience. When someone speaks to you, imagine stepping into their shoes, seeing the world through their eyes. I recall a conversation with a friend who was going through a tough time. By simply being present and giving my full attention, no distractions, no phone, I could sense an immediate change. They felt seen and heard, and that, in itself, was a comfort to them. The next step in this journey is learning to recognize and respond to emotions. People communicate feelings more often than we realize, often through subtle cues. During a heated debate, for example, don't just focus on the words. Look at what's beneath them. Is there fear, sadness, frustration? By acknowledging these emotions, you create a bridge of understanding. I remember a time when a colleague shared their frustration over a project. Instead of focusing on the complaint, I said, "It sounds like you're feeling really overwhelmed." Suddenly, the entire dynamic changed. They opened up more, and a solution-oriented conversation followed. Creating a safe space for open communication is essential for empathetic listening. Think of it as building a sanctuary where the other person feels secure enough to share their thoughts and emotions without judgment. This means practicing patience and restraint, especially with people who may struggle to express themselves. I found that simple acts like nodding, maintaining eye contact, and giving reassuring responses, like "Yeah, I'm here for you," should go a long way. There was an instance with a family member where just sitting silently beside them, letting them know I was ready to listen whenever they were ready to talk, made all the difference. As you embark on the path to becoming an empathetic listener, remember that it's a skill honed over time. Every interaction is an opportunity to practice. Try empathizing even in everyday conversations. You'll notice the shifts in your relationships and how people respond to your newfound attentiveness. Start by setting the intention to listen with your heart and offer the gift of your complete and compassionate attention. You might be surprised by the wonders it can work in the lives of those around you, and in your own. Chapter 13. Using Communication to Achieve Success. Negotiation and Persuasion Skills. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you needed to get something done, but couldn't figure out how to get everyone on the same page? Maybe it was at work, during a family gathering, or even just trying to decide where to go for dinner with friends. I've been there myself many times, and I've found that the key lies in mastering the art of negotiation and persuasion through effective communication. Imagine this. I was working on a team project that required everyone's input to succeed. Naturally, we had differing opinions and priorities, and at one point, it seemed like we'd never come to an agreement. I realized then that simply stating facts and hoping everyone would come around wasn't enough. I needed to listen actively. By truly understanding each team member's concerns and validating their feelings, I was able to frame my suggestions in a way that resonated with them. Rather than bulldozing my way through, I learned to ask open-ended questions that guided them towards considering alternatives. This approach not only bridged gaps but fostered mutual respect and collaboration. Achieving win-win solutions entails more than just finding a middle ground. It requires a mindset that seeks mutually beneficial outcomes rather than one-sided victories. It reminds me of a negotiation I had with a client over contract terms. Initially, our discussions were tense, with each side holding firm positions. Taking a step back, I expressed genuine empathy towards their concerns and shared insights into our constraints transparently. This openness fostered trust, transforming our standoff into a cooperative dialogue. Together, we identified key priorities and crafted a solution that balanced both parties' needs. It's about creating an environment where all voices are heard and valued, leading to sustainable agreements. This doesn't mean you always split everything 50-50ths. Often, it's about exploring creative solutions that meet the underlying needs of all involved. A practical tip I've found invaluable is to prepare thoroughly before entering any negotiation. Understand not just your own objectives, but also the interests and potential constraints of the other party. When you walk in with knowledge and empathy, you're not just winging it, you're equipped to engage in meaningful and influential conversations. This can make the difference between reaching a compromise that everyone can live with and fostering lasting, positive relationships. Networking and relationship building. I remember the first time I walked into a networking event, feeling like a fish out of water. The room buzzed with conversations, and for a moment, I just stood there, paralyzed. It was then that I realized the importance of effective communication. Breaking the ice with strangers isn't just about exchanging business cards, it's about creating a genuine connection. The magic happens when you find common ground. Sometimes it's as simple as starting with a genuine compliment or discussing an ongoing industry trend. These small, thoughtful interactions can be the foundation of long-lasting professional relationships. Over time, I learned that making meaningful connections requires more than just being present. It's about being genuinely interested in others and what they have to say. When you ask questions and listen actively, you create a space where real collaboration can begin. One strategy one found particularly useful is following up after meetings or events. A simple "it was great meeting you" email can go a long way. Mention something specific from your conversation to show you're not just sending a generic message. This practice not only strengthens the bond, but also keeps the door open for future opportunities. Expanding your network doesn't mean you have to attend every event or meet every person. It's about quality over quantity. Focus on building a few deep connections rather than a broad but shallow network. Find individuals whose values align with yours and who can challenge and inspire you. Collaborations are born out of mutual respect and shared goals. For instance, one of my most fruitful partnerships began with a casual discussion over coffee. We discovered that our skills complemented each other perfectly, leading to a project that benefited both our careers. Always be open to serendipity. Sometimes the most meaningful connections happen when you least expect them. Effective communication in leadership. As leaders, we often find ourselves in situations where our ability to communicate can make or break our efforts to lead effectively. Picture yourself facing a crisis at work. Team morale is low. Uncertainty is high. It's during these moments that the true power of effective communication shines through. I remember a time when my team faced an unexpected project delay. The stakes were high, and the room was thick with tension. Everyone looked at me, expecting clarity and direction. Instead of succumbing to the stress, I took a moment to breathe, collected my thoughts, and chose my words carefully. I focused on delivering a clear, concise message while showing genuine understanding of their concerns. This experience taught me that communication in leadership isn't just about speaking, it's about connecting. It's about active listening as much as it is about articulating your vision. I asked open-ended questions to understand their perspectives and used those insights to align the team's efforts. I found that when people feel heard, they're more likely to be motivated and cooperative, which ultimately helps in both leading and influencing effectively. Now, imagine integrating empathy, transparency, and inspiration into your communication style. Empathetic communication means putting yourself in others' shoes. Take the time to acknowledge their feelings and thoughts, which builds trust and rapport. I recall a colleague who was visibly struggling with their workload. Instead of immediate course correction, I engaged in a genuine conversation to understand their challenges. This empathetic approach not only resolved the issues, but also strengthened our working relationship. Transparency, on the other hand, breeds trust. When faced with difficult decisions, being open about the thought process and criteria can prevent misunderstandings and build a culture of honesty. In one instance, during a budget cut, I was transparent about the constraints and the reasons behind each decision. This openness helped the team navigate through the tough times with a shared understanding and less resistance. And then, there's inspiring communication. As leaders, our words have the power to ignite passion and drive. I remember a project kickoff meeting where I shared a compelling vision of what success would look like for the team. Drawing on personal anecdotes and future possibilities, I aimed to paint a vivid picture that everyone wanted to be a part of. The energy in the room shifted, and the team embarked on the project with renewed enthusiasm. The cornerstone of being a great leader is the ability to connect, build trust, and inspire action through our words. The next time you find yourself leading a discussion, remember to listen as much as you speak, be transparent in your intentions, and never underestimate the power of an inspiring story. Try ending your day with a reflection. Did your words today build bridges or barriers? Chapter 14. Communication in times of stress. Staying calm and collected in stressful situations. When the clouds of stress gather overhead, it often feels as if they might sweep us away. We each have our own storms. Maybe it's a deadline at work, a family crisis, or an unexpected twist in our plans. In those moments, our ability to communicate effectively and keep our cool becomes our greatest asset. I've learned through personal experience that developing strategies for communication amid chaos starts with understanding our own reactions. Do you ever notice how your breath shortens or your voice tightens without you realizing? Awareness is the first step. Start by mastering the art of grounding yourself. One morning, I found myself overwhelmed by a barrage of urgent emails. I took a moment and focused on my breathing. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. This tiny habit transformed how I approached each message, calmly, clearly, and with intention. As you master awareness, the next piece of the puzzle is emotion management. Emotions are powerful and often unpredictable, especially under pressure. Have you ever felt so angry or fearful that you couldn't think straight? I certainly have, and it's a normal human response. The key is learning techniques to balance these emotions so that they don't control us. Imagine a pot of boiling water. If left unattended, it can overflow and cause a mess. But if you manage the heat, the water remains useful. Similarly, techniques such as mindfulness and perspective-taking can be life-changing. On one occasion, amidst a misunderstanding with a colleague, I remembered to pause and mentally step into their shoes. It wasn't easy, but the simple act of trying to understand their perspective diffused my frustration and led to a constructive dialogue. Keeping a clear head allows us to see the forest for the trees, and sometimes all it takes is a moment of empathy. Finally, when the pressure cooker of life starts to hiss, finding constructive solutions becomes paramount. Many times, our initial reactions are driven by stress rather than thoughtful consideration. To counter this, I've found it invaluable to embrace problem-solving methods that emphasize clarity and cooperation over conflict. For instance, in a tight project deadline that left my team stressed and scattered, we stopped, gathered in a room, and listed out each task. We prioritized them together, shared responsibilities based on strengths, and set mini deadlines. This collaborative approach not only divided the load, but also built a stronger team spirit. Solutions born from such collective effort tend to be more sustainable and less stressful. Next time you are caught in a storm of stress, practice breathing to ground yourself, manage your emotions with mindfulness, and prioritize collaborative solutions. These small adjustments can make a world of difference, turning chaos into an opportunity for growth. Empathetic communication during crisis. Let's delve into the powerful role empathy and compassion play in effective communication during times of crisis. I remember once being in a major crisis at work, a significant system failure that affected thousands of users. Stress levels were through the roof, and everyone was scrambling to find a solution. In those moments, I noticed that straightforward communication wasn't enough. It was when someone acknowledged the stress and frustration I was feeling that I felt a bit more grounded. A simple, sincere, "I can see how hard this is for you," made a world of difference. It wasn't about solving the problem instantly, but connecting on a human level. During crises, emotions run high, and logic can often take a back seat. Approaching conversations with empathy allows us to connect beyond the surface problem. It's about stepping into another person's shoes, feeling their worry or fear, and then responding with kindness. This connection forms a bridge, making the communication more effective and lessening the emotional burden we carry. Offering support in challenging circumstances requires specific techniques. I recall a time when a friend was going through a severe personal crisis. Instead of inundating them with solutions, I learned to listen more. The act of giving undivided attention, nodding, and repeating back what they said made them feel heard and understood. It's important to validate their emotions. Phrases like "it's okay to feel this way" can be incredibly supportive. Providing reassurance sometimes isn't about saying everything will be fine, but about conveying that you're there with them during the turmoil. My friend felt more reassured knowing they weren't alone rather than hearing generalized optimistic predictions. Creating a supportive environment hinges on our ability to understand what the other person needs at that moment. Sometimes people need a shoulder to cry on. Other times, they need practical help or merely a distraction. I remember offering to handle mundane tasks when a colleague was overwhelmed. Little by little, helping them declutter their workload allowed them to focus on more critical issues. Reassurance can come through actions as much as words. Being present, consistently showing up, and providing steady support can soothe even the most turbulent anxieties. By immersing ourselves in their world temporarily, we demonstrate a commitment to their well-being, which can be profoundly reassuring. Supporting others through stressful times. When it comes to offering emotional support during stressful situations, effective communication stands as a fundamental pillar. I remember a moment clearly from a few years back when a close friend was facing a tumultuous time at work. Feeling overwhelmed by the mounting pressures, it was like she was caught in a storm without an umbrella. My initial attempts to help her were met with frustration, because I didn't truly grasp how crucial intentional and compassionate communication was in these moments. It dawned on me that listening isn't just about hearing words, it's about understanding emotions, offering a shoulder to lean on, and creating a safe space for vulnerability. The power of a kind word, a gentle touch, or just being present can never be underestimated. It's within these quiet gestures that we show we genuinely care. Learning to actively listen was a game changer for me. Active listening means more than just nodding your head or making sympathetic noises while someone else speaks. It involves fully engaging with the person's story, making eye contact, and reflecting back what you've heard to ensure that you comprehend their feelings and thoughts accurately. When my friend shared her worries with me, instead of jumping in with solutions, I started practicing just echoing back her concerns. "It sounds like you're feeling really unappreciated at work." This practice validated her feelings rather than dismissing them and opened up deeper levels of communication. Pairing this with offering empathy, acknowledging her distress and relating to her feelings, built a bridge of trust and comfort. Providing comfort isn't only about words. Actions speak volumes too. I remember going through a particularly rough patch myself, and a simple act of kindness from a colleague turned my day around. She brought me a cup of coffee and a note saying, "Here for you whenever you need." That small gesture made me feel seen and supported without any pressure to talk immediately. Inspired by that, I began incorporating similar acts into my interactions, whether it was offering a hug if someone looked like they needed one or giving a surprise gift of their favorite snack. These actions can lift the heart and convey that you're there to lend a hand or an ear, making the burden of stress a little lighter. Remember, sometimes the most significant impact comes from seemingly small efforts. When supporting others through stressful times, it's less about having all the right answers and more about being present, listening, and showing you care through both words and actions. So next time you're there for someone, just be genuine, listen with your heart, and share small acts of kindness. It can make all the difference. Chapter 15. The Power of Storytelling in Communication. Crafting compelling narratives. In the world of storytelling, every word we choose can either build a bridge to our listener's heart or create a chasm of disinterest. I remember the first time I realized the power of weaving an engaging story. It was during a casual dinner with friends. Instead of merely recounting the events of my day, I painted a vivid picture, carefully selecting details that sparkled with emotion. Their faces lit up with anticipation, and suddenly, my mundane experience transformed into an enthralling tale. The foundation of an effective story lies in its structure. Imagine a story as a journey. It needs a clear path that guides listeners from the beginning through a series of pivotal moments to an impactful climax. Start with a hook, something intriguing that grabs attention. When I share personal anecdotes, I often begin with an arresting fact or an unusual circumstance. This primes my audience for the adventure ahead, making them eager to know more. Characters breathe life into your narrative. Drawing from my own experiences, I introduced a character study by first inviting empathy. For instance, I once shared a story about a colleague who overcame incredible odds to achieve something remarkable. By highlighting their struggles and small victories along the way, listeners could see parts of themselves mirrored in the narrative. The key is to flesh out characters so they feel real and relatable. A person's quirks, fears, and dreams can make a story unforgettable. Connecting emotionally through stories. Growing up, I found myself irresistibly drawn to the stories my grandfather used to tell. Each of his tales seemed to carry more than just words. They carried the essence of experiences, emotions, and values that resonated deeply with me. It's amazing how stories can transport us across time and space, making us feel emotions that we may have never experienced ourselves. This capacity of storytelling to create connections and evoke empathy is truly profound. I have often found myself immersed in a narrative, feeling the joy, pain, excitement, or sorrow of its characters. It's as if these stories break down the barriers that separate us, weaving us into the same emotional fabric. Through storytelling, we are able to connect emotionally, sharing in the human experience regardless of our backgrounds or circumstances. When we tell a story, we open a window into our inner worlds. To communicate emotions effectively through storytelling, it's essential to be genuine. Authenticity resonates with people. I remember once sharing a personal experience during a presentation. It was a story of a minor failure that led to eventual success. As I spoke, I could see the audience's response. They weren't just listening, they were feeling it with me. By being vulnerable and open, I had made a connection. Techniques such as using vivid imagery, incorporating dialogue, and focusing on sensory details can make stories come alive, enabling listeners to share an experience vividly. It's about painting a picture with words, allowing others to see through your eyes and feel through your heart. Using storytelling to influence and inspire. Storytelling is a powerful tool that transcends mere words. It has a unique ability to capture emotions, trigger memories, and spark action. Drawing from my own experiences, I've noticed that sharing personal stories helps me connect on a deeper level with others. By revealing my journey, struggles, and triumphs, I can inspire and motivate those around me, often without explicitly trying to do so. It's not just about the story itself, but how it's told and the authentic connections it fosters. When people see genuine passion and feel understood, they are far more likely to be influenced by my perspective. This kind of intimate engagement can create a ripple effect, prompting them to share their own experiences and furthering the cycle of influence. In various contexts like marketing, leadership, and personal development, storytelling can be an incredibly effective strategy. Take marketing, for instance. Rather than focusing purely on the features of a product or service, weaving a narrative around it can evoke empathy and emotional investment from potential customers. Consider how advertisements for insurance often tell stories of families overcoming hardships or finding relief in moments of crisis. These narratives make abstract concepts feel very real and relatable, prompting customers to make decisions based on emotions as much as rational thought. In leadership, a story can serve to unify a group under a common vision or morale. Sharing a leader's vision through a compelling story can transform an abstract goal into a shared mission, making team members feel like part of an important journey. In personal development, telling stories about past failures and eventual successes can do wonders for one's own growth as well as those who hear it, providing valuable lessons and motivation to persevere. One practical tip I've found immensely useful is to focus on the emotional core of the story. What is the underlying emotion I want to convey? Whether it's hope, resilience, or fear, tapping into these emotions can make a story much more impactful. When I share my own experiences, I try to be as honest and vulnerable as possible, because authenticity resonates the most. People can tell when a story is genuine and when it's fabricated, and honesty always strengthens the connection. Crafting a story that is both personal and universal requires striking a balance between specificity and broader themes. Specific details make the story vibrant, while universal themes ensure it speaks to a wide audience. By doing this, I create narratives that not only engage but also inspire, motivate, and influence others in profound ways. As we conclude the art of effective communication, unlocking the secrets to better relationships and success, I want to thank you for embarking on this journey with me, brought to you by Mindful Literary. Throughout this audiobook, we've explored the essential elements of communication, from the power of effective listening to the nuances of nonverbal cues, and the art of empathetic dialogue. We've delved into the complexities of relationships, both personal and professional, and uncovered strategies to overcome common barriers to communication. Remember, effective communication is a lifelong skill that evolves with practice and mindfulness. By applying the insights and techniques shared in this book, you are well on your way to becoming a more adept and compassionate communicator. Whether you're mending relationships, navigating workplace dynamics, or simply striving for personal growth, these tools will serve you well. Take the lessons learned here and continue to practice them in your daily interactions. Embrace the power of empathy, the clarity of thoughtful speech, and the strength of genuine connection. As you do, you'll find that effective communication not only enriches your relationships, but also opens doors to new opportunities and greater success. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. May your journey toward mastering communication be filled with growth, understanding, and fulfillment. Written by Mindful Literary.